Welcome to episode 391 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. 2 years after Denmark abolished its USO for letters, PostNord Denmark no longer delivers domestic letters, and there are lessons for the rest of the postal world. Joining me in a moment are Mindaugas Cerpickis, partner at Copenhagen Economics, and Jacob Østermann, a lead economist at Copenhagen Economics, to talk about what has happened over the past 2 years and what's the current state of play when it comes to letters in Denmark. Joining me on the line are Mindaugas Cerpickis, he's partner at Copenhagen Economics, and Jacob Østermann. Jacob is the lead economist at Copenhagen Economics. We're going to talk about the Danish letter market and the changes that have happened, the 2024 changes and the more recent changes with PostNord exiting the business altogether. Mindaugas, before we get into the details, you want to just share a bit about the perspective that Copenhagen Economics has on this particular, the events over the last few years in Denmark with regard to the letter service?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Ian. Thanks for having us. Just a disclaimer, we have not worked on this topic with any of the stakeholders here in Denmark, neither DEO or PostNord or the government. So with providing an outside perspective, although physically, of course, we are very close to it being based here in Copenhagen.
Well, Jacob, why don't we start then with an overview of the abolition of the USO back in 2024, just to catch us up on what happened back then.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So as a brief recap, I think most of you already know, but back in January 2024, the USO was officially abolished in Denmark. And this basically means that since then, postal service has been provided mainly on commercial terms. However, there is still some regulation in the market. First of all, there has been three targeted measures being introduced where there is likely to be a gap in the market without the USO. And in addition, there has been introduction of a new licensing framework, which is meant to ensure that there continues to be a nationwide availability of postal service at a uniform pricing. I think that's at a high level recap what has been going on since 2024.
And so what has happened in practice since then? So since that announcement was made, and you mentioned those three, the three measures that were introduced. So tell us a little bit about what's happened since then.
Yeah, so if we start with the commercial provision of letter service, I think here, I would like to say there's a bit of a misunderstanding in the world. Some say that you can no longer send letters in Denmark. That is incorrect. It is still possible to send a letter, but things has changed. So it is correct that PostNord has, as of January this year, exited the business of the letter service and focused on parcel services. However, we still have the alternative provider, DEO, providing letter delivery service. So we can still send letters here in Denmark, and that's but no longer provided by PostNord, but by DEO.
Jacob, you've mentioned the commercial measures. Can you tell us about the targeted measures, I think they're called?
Yeah. So beyond this commercial provision, there is still some intervention in the market, and there is three targeted measures that has been introduced since the abolishment of the USO. The first one is the free shipments for the blind. Here there was a public tender which DEO won, so they have now taken over the responsibility of having free shipments for the blind from PostNord, and they are receiving around 3 to 4 euros per letter delivered for this service. That was their offer in this tender. A second targeted measure was these island communities, which maybe the market is not going to cover because we have a lot of small islands in Denmark, which are only connected with a ferry. So there's a high cost of going out there. So it's not sure that every provider will do that on commercial terms. So to make sure that citizens living on these small islands, it was also planned to run a public tender, but that was cancelled. So instead of that, there was created a fund, and this fund is made for the small island communities where they can apply for the fund to receive money to have more tailored solution that fits the need of that specific island. So instead of giving compensation to our operator, now the small islands are receiving the money directly and can use them to build postal infrastructure in the best way that suits them. And then the final targeted measure, Denmark as a member of UPU, it is responsible for having international mail. And here a temporary model with a shared operation between PostNord and DEO has been installed.
Jacob, just tell us a bit about what you've seen, what you've observed in the service levels over that period when it comes to speed of letter delivery and letter pricing and things like that.
If we look at delivery speed and reliability, we actually see that the market provision is exceeding the former USO requirement. So the historical USO required that 93% of letters was delivered within 5 days. And then if we look at the commercial provision, we actually see that DAO is now delivering 99% of its letters within 5 days. In this way, it is exceeding the former USO requirement. It is, however, based on data going back from May 25. So it is a bit old. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen, especially now that PostNord has exited the letter market. And my understanding is that we might know more in the coming months, as the regulator is soon to publish an updated analysis of the delivery performance in Denmark. So that's the delivery side. If you then look at the prices, there has been an increase in the cheapest price of the letter service in the market that has gone up, but it follows from a change in which weight category that is offered for letters. So with the USO, PostNord offered a 50-gram letter, but following the abolishment of the USO, PostNord also dropped the 50-gram letter, which meant that if you as a citizen need to send a letter, you had to pay for 100-gram letter, which is more expensive than the 50-gram letter. But if you look at the price level within a certain weight category, there has been some changes, but it's not as significant as the whole minimum price letter increase.
Now, there's always been the issue, if I've understood correctly, in Denmark about the digital mailbox. So the digital mailbox is mandatory, except for, I think, is it 5% of the population that isn't obliged to have the digital mailbox? So what has happened with those citizens who are exempt from the digital mailbox mandate? What's all this mean for them?
In Denmark, everyone, the default is digital communication with the government. However, all citizens has the right to opt out of that digital mailbox and have physical letters being delivered to them. And they will still receive letters, and they still do. But it's no longer PostNord that are delivering those letters. We have DAO left in the letter market, which are then delivering the letters. So nothing has really changed here.
Just tell us a bit more about who can be exempt. So you mentioned that some people can opt out.
Yeah.
Are there other categories of citizens who are automatically exempt, like whether it's the people who have no access to the internet, or the elderly, or people who might be, I don't know, have Alzheimer's and have no care? I don't know. Who are the kind of people who are exempted from the digital mailbox mandate?
It is mainly the elderly that are exempted in Denmark, but everyone can be exempted. You don't really need a lot of certain certificates saying that you cannot access a digital mailbox. Basically, you just need to show up in person at your local municipality to say, I would like to receive physical letters instead of digital letters. And then you are being exempted from the digital mailbox and will receive your letters in your mailbox instead of in a digital mailbox. So everyone can do it, but it is mainly the elderly that has opted out of this digital communication.
But even under the other provider, I'll say DAO. Is it DAO or DAO? How do you pronounce it? DAO. Under this other provider, the non-PostNord provider, they're still delivering only once a week, though. Is that right?
They are delivering more than once a week, but there's no requirements for that.
All right, so they're mandated to deliver at least once a week, but they deliver right.
Deliver more often. And this means that with the new licensing framework, they have the obligation to deliver to all parts of Denmark. So it means that anywhere where you live in Denmark, you have the right to receive letters in your mailbox if you're exempted from the digital mailbox.
And so they're delivering domestic letters to all corners of the country, if I've understood correctly. Okay, well then that raises the next question, which is about international mail. And Mindaugas, I understand that you're across this one. What's happening with international mail into and out of Denmark in the aftermath of PostNord pulling out of letter delivery and the changes to this other delivery provider for letters?
Well, yes, I think this is really interesting because we are not aware of a similar case where the historical incumbent operator would cease letter delivery, and how do you handle international side of the market? So as a member of Universal Postal Union, Denmark is required to maintain international postal connectivity. And this obligation stands independent of domestic market reforms or policy changes. So in practice, this means that Denmark must have arrangements in place to support international mail exchange, access to sorting, transport, terminal infrastructure. And when PostNord announced that it would stop delivering domestic letters, in principle, we see like three options how Denmark could have handled that situation, right? So first option would be to designate DEO as an international operator. Theoretically, that's possible, right? In practice, this would probably require significant investment from DEO in infrastructure, technology, and know-how also, how to actually handle all this international flow, connect to information exchange systems, and so on. So that can be difficult, especially difficult to do it overnight. Another option would be, again, to designate DEO, but expect maybe that DEO would form some partnerships with other universal service providers who are already connected. And it doesn't have to be PostNord. It could be, like in theory, it could be anyone from a neighboring country as well that would help out on the collection side and this interconnection with other operators globally. And they are handling middle mile and last mile within Denmark, as they do with all domestic traffic. So that would be another option. And of course, a variation of this option is that DEO would partner with PostNord. And that's actually what happened. Officially, it is announced as a temporary solution. It is unclear to us what would be the long-term solution. I don't think that was announced. So at the moment, the way it actually works is that PostNord maintains its operation within the airport, in the terminal. So they're still receiving international mail that is coming to Denmark and handing it over to DEO. And then DEO takes it from there to deliver to home. So from that perspective, it sounds smooth. It involves state funding. So in the 2025 prices, PostNord received 110 million Danish kroner for this. So it's about 15 million euros or $17 million. Quite significant. And in terms of consumers, price for international mail, so sending abroad from Denmark, went down from 50 krona to 46. So I think consumers are happy about that. Of course, there are some changes, practical changes regarding that. Where do you need to deposit this international letter? But in terms of access points, DEO is providing a very dense network in Denmark. It may be just a different place, a different supermarket where you need to go to deposit the letter.
And we've all seen the photographs recently, the videos of PostNord's Danish posting boxes being removed and offered up for sale. Have either of you bought one? No.
I was really trying to get one. It proved to be harder to get that one than tickets to Radiohead. Yes, it was. The system was overloaded with people trying to buy it, and unfortunately, it didn't manage.
I think they went up for sale for around 1,500 Danish kroners. But now in the second-hand market, I see they're going for like 5,000 kroner. So there's a huge demand for these historical mailboxes.
Well, they won't fit in the vintage parcel lockers, though, will they? So anyway, just remaining on the international for just a moment. So Mindaugas, if I've understood correctly, then we've been talking about the USO and letters, but when it comes to parcels and international parcels that have been going through the international postal stream, those arrangements stay in place. So you can still send a parcel with PostNord if you're in Denmark. You can send with PostNord to the rest of the world, and vice versa, I suppose.
Yes, yeah? Indeed, of course, because PostNord's focus is now on parcels, so they maintain that service.
Now, let's get on to something I think that we're all very interested to hear about, which is what lessons can we learn from the Danish example? And it's particularly relevant given the news that's come out of Norway recently when it comes to the consultation on changes to letter delivery in Norway. And we know there are many other countries around the world looking at changes to letter delivery. So what are some of the key lessons that we can learn from what's been happening in Denmark over the last couple of years? Mindaugas?
Well, I think the first one is, of course, Denmark is an exciting case for all the postal nerds as a guinea pig undergoing this transition, first from abolishing the USO, but then also transitioning operations from a legacy incumbent to another player. And it's not surprising, I think, that Denmark is the first one in this route because Denmark is very digitized and it has really, through policy decisions, pushed a lot of communication towards digital channel. But even in such a country where digital communication with the government is mandatory, you can see that physical letters are still important. Because otherwise, why would the government would still go through all this hassle with tenders that Jacob explained and finding these new arrangements, right? So physical letters are still playing an important role. That's one lesson. Another one that I would say is the role of these targeted measures. I think the initial idea was that everything can be just procured on the market, right? But soon it became clear that some activities, like the one I just mentioned about international mail, are not really abundant on the market. There is only one player who can actually do it in a country. So a tender will not solve it. You need something else. You still need to negotiate and go and take, let's say, a more difficult path where you need to find arrangement between different players. So public tenders, I think, from economic perspective, of course, it always makes sense to run a public tender to open things to a market, but clearly it's not always possible. It's not feasible to do it this way.
There's a lot for us to really mull over when it comes to what we've observed in Denmark over the last few years. It's more than just the last 2 years, really, because Denmark really was, as you mentioned, the digitization has meant that Denmark has been a leader in changing its approach to letter delivery. Before we wrap up, Mindaugas and Jacob, are there any other points that you want to add to our discussion with regard to either the Danish USO situation or more broadly letter delivery in other markets?
I think there is one that maybe we didn't touch upon is DEO. So the fact that Denmark had an alternative to PostNord is also very interesting, and I don't think it's necessarily the case in many other countries. So DEO historically is a newspaper delivery company, originally established by media companies in Denmark, and I think it is grounded on the history of strong printed media demand in Denmark, which led to the creation of this infrastructure that has nationwide delivery network, and it also has early morning delivery capacity. And when you have that, you can use that network to deliver letters, because letters, they have lower SLA requirements than early morning delivery of newspapers. So you can technically put letters on top of that infrastructure. I mean, I'm oversimplifying. Of course, if the amount of letters would be very significant, that could present operational challenges, but we are in a situation in Denmark where volumes are more than 90% down from the historical peak volumes. So the amount is not as significant. But many countries around the world, they don't have this kind of alternative. And that's why in other countries we see discussions about maybe using PUDOs as an alternative. So giving up on a home doorstep delivery, because I think there's no other way to do it in other countries.
Mindaugas, we've covered a fair bit of territory here talking about the USO in Denmark. If people want to find out more about Copenhagen Economics, the work you've done in the postal sector and things like that, where should they go? Who should they talk to?
Well, of course, you can find us on LinkedIn and on our website. And then I will use the opportunity here, Ian, if you don't mind, to also market our annual conference that we are hosting in Copenhagen, April 16th, 17th. It will be our 12th annual conference. It's only in person, but I believe we'll have many industry stakeholders discussing these topics in there.
I'll include a link to that somewhere on the Postal Hub website, either on this episode page or in the events section. Go over to thepostalhub.com and you'll find information there about the Copenhagen Economics event. Mindaugas Cerpickis, partner at Copenhagen Economics, and Jacob Østermann, lead economist at Copenhagen Economics. Thank you both very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, Lynn Guzal, Chief Retail Officer at POS Malaysia. We're going to talk about post offices. I'll also be joined soon by Peter Summers, Alan Barry, and many other leading lights in the postal and delivery world. Don't miss a single episode of the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast in your favourite podcast platform. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, if that tickles your fancy. I'm sure there are others out there as well. Subscribe, leave a rating for the podcast, 5 out of 5, please. That'll be great. And if you have a moment, write a review. Some of the platforms allow you to do that. What else can I ask of you? Not much. It's really what I can do for you. I can offer you my weekly newsletter. Every time there's a new podcast, I send a newsletter. Or my daily delivery digest. It's a daily email with all the headlines from around the delivery world. Sign up for both of them at thepostalhub.com. That's thepostalhub.com. Follow the links there to the weekly newsletter and to the daily delivery digest. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow the Postal Hub podcast at LinkedIn. You don't even have to invite me to connect anymore. Well, you can if you really want to, but send a note when you do it. What else? My email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.